Thank you so much, everyone. So glad to be here today and to welcome Melissa Siegel. She is a registered dietitian at the Grand River Community Health Center. And Melissa believes that all foods can fit in a nutritious diet. And you can find Melissa leading cooking classes and nutrition groups at the Grand River Community Health Center. Melissa also provides one-to-one counseling for certain needs for those in the Brantford community as well. And you can always find out more about the nutrition services offered at the Grand River Community Health Center by visiting their website at www.grandriverchc.ca. And now I would like to give the floor to Melissa for her presentation. Take it away.
Thank you for that introduction. So I've been asked today to talk about making the most of your fall harvest while keeping our budget in mind. And so we will be sharing some budget tips, talking about some common fall produce and recipes, and sharing some resources today. So in Canada, there's an abundance of fresh produce this time of year, and we are lucky being in southern Ontario that we have a lot of farms that provide this produce. And as you can see by this chart, this is our vegetables that we're kind of in the prime time being September, October. We've got all our veggies from B to Z listed here. And you'll also notice that a lot of our fall produce are those common things we think about with fall when it comes to squashes, root vegetables. I see cabbage and cauliflower and potatoes. So these are those delicious vegetables we find in a lot of soups and stews, those warming dishes this time of year. And you can find this kind of chart at the resource that I'm referencing today for a lot of our recipes and information. It's called www.halfyourplate. And I really encourage you to go check out that website at the end of this presentation. There's also a produce guide for fruits. So we're also lucky in Canada that we produce a lot of fresh vegetables and fruits in greenhouses throughout the year, and that we also import a lot of delicious varieties of produce as well. But in terms of what we grow here, again, being October, we've got apples, cranberries, pears, grapes. So these are all things we also think about when we think about fall harvest. So today we're going to talk a little bit about how to get all that produce, but also keep in mind our budget. And these are the things we're going to talk about today. So a little bit about meal planning, proper storage, how to freeze and preserve this produce so we can enjoy it through the long winter months. Some suggestions for eating our produce from head to toe and batch cooking. And I'll share some recipes along the way. So number one, meal planning. It's the thing that dietitians always suggest and no one wants to do, but it's really helpful for us to save money on produce because we're going to reduce our waste. So meal planning allows us to think about what do we need to buy for the week ahead? How are we going to use it? It can be really exciting this time of year to go into a grocery store and see all the colorful fresh produce and think, ooh, I'm going to buy that and I'll eat that this week. But do you really need that bushel of tomatoes, right? So we have to think about how am I going to use it? Where can I store it in my home, right? Do I have a dark cupboard for a 10-pound bag of potatoes? We also have to think, do we have time for preparing produce or doing the freezing or canning we envision when we're in the store looking at that bushel of tomatoes? Are we actually going to be able to do that? My husband's says, my favorite hobby is saving leftovers and throwing them out 2 days later. So our freezer gets full of produce, but if you really are not planning for how you're going to use it, whether it's fresh or frozen, you end up throwing a lot of it out. So planning really helps. And then we'll talk about proper storage of our fruits and veggies. So did you know that just the fear of spoilage of your produce going bad is the number one reason Canadians don't buy and eat enough fruits and vegetables? So we think, oh, I'm just going to throw it out, so why buy it anyways? So how can we properly store this produce? Again, the Half Your Plate has this great guide to help you know which fruits and vegetables store best where. So we'll just go through this a little bit. So some, especially our fruits, need to stay out of the fridge and do best on our countertop. This allows them to continue their ripening, to improve their taste and their texture. And then, of course, you could put them in the fridge to slow that process. Some produce, such as apples, tomatoes, melons, and onions, produce a gas called ethylene. And this gas is what can help ripen other fruits and vegetables faster. So sometimes you want this to work out for you. So maybe storing your apples by your green bananas will help your bananas ripen faster. But other times you might want to keep your apples away from things like your tomatoes so that they don't ripen the tomatoes as fast. So in the fridge, store your high ethylene producing produce separate from the other produce you want to kind of keep longer. I'm sure many of you have your produce drawers in your fridge. Usually there's two drawers. Some people might have a drawer that's labeled fruits and ones that's labeled vegetables, or your drawer might have a little vent tab that you can adjust. So in the drawer with the vent tab, that's kind of where you want to store these high ethylene producing fruits, because that vent tab allows the ethylene gas to escape. And then kind of keep this produce separate as well in the drawer. So I know a lot of us kind of just shove it all in there wherever it fits, but that might make things spoil a little quicker. And then some produce does better in the pantry. So think of those hardy vegetables, those root vegetables like sweet potatoes, and then you have your squash, winter squash, onions, garlic. And these do better when they're not stored by produce with ethylene gas. So for example, you don't want to store your onions and potatoes together. The onions will make your potatoes grow eyes quicker. And then we want to also keep these items in a cool, dark place. So for example, with potatoes, they start to turn green in the sun, just like any plant would. And unfortunately for potatoes, when they start to turn green, that's a sign to us that they're starting to produce a toxin called solanine. And if we eat that toxin in large quantities, we can end up with some tummy upset. So with potatoes, you want to make sure if you see any green, you're peeling that away. Usually it's the kind of top layer of your potato, and take out any of the little sprouts that are starting to grow. And then usually your potato is fine. But if you have a potato that's gone green all the way through, it's best to throw that away. And we'll talk a little bit more in a slide or two about freezing. So the other thing we might want to think about is just how to store some of that produce in our fridge so that it lasts longer. We talked already about using those crisper drawers properly. We also might want to think about keeping things that spoil more easily in the main part of the fridge, not on the door. The door is kind of the warmest place of your fridge. Most produce, I'm thinking of grapes, lettuce, they come in packages that are meant for the ventilation and to try and keep that produce fresh. So number one thing is to kind of keep your produce in the package it comes in. That's usually helpful. But if you want to keep your leafy greens a bit longer, one idea is to wash them, dry them thoroughly, and wrap them in some paper towel. And then you would put that into a sealed plastic bag or an airtight container. The paper towel helps to absorb some of the moisture. Moisture's kind of the number one thing we want to kind of avoid with our produce, that it really increases spoilage. Things like mushrooms, we want to keep them in a paper bag. They tend to do best that way. Some plants, like our asparagus and definitely our fresh herbs, do well for longer if we store them in a little bit of water. So you can take a mug or a mason jar, put a little water in the bottom, stick the herbs in the jar, cover it with a plastic bag loosely, and that kind of creates the environment that keeps those fresh longer. And things like corn, keep the husk on so it comes in its own wrapper. Let nature do its thing. And then root vegetables, again, we're kind of wanting to take off the part that will spoil the fastest. So chopping off the tops, the leafy greens, save those in the paper towel and plastic bag for using later, and then put the root vegetables in a sealed container. And that just keeps them from drying out too much. So freezing and preserving. So if we can't eat through all that produce that we purchased, or it's got a little too ripe on the counter and we're thinking, oh no, I don't want to throw this out, freezing. We can pretty much freeze any produce. Things with a higher water content maybe really changes the texture, like leafy greens don't freeze as well, but you could still freeze it and then put it in a soup or casserole. So your firmer fruits and vegetables do well with freezing, and really mostly it can just be washing it, drying it thoroughly, and then cutting it sometimes is helpful into the size that you'll likely use for later. And then just put it in again, a freezer bag, squish out as much air as you can, or put it in an airtight container. And that just helps with limiting freezer burn. And then store it in your freezer. Some things, like there's a picture of berries there, of strawberries. So if we just washed these, put them in the bag, they might end up clumping together. So one trick is to lay your produce out in a single layer on a plate or a tray if you have a large enough freezer to do that, and allow it to freeze for a few hours and then transfer it to a bag. And then this should keep it in the individual pieces. And most of the time, your produce will be at its best kind of within 6 to 8 months. You can definitely use it past then, but you might find the texture changes. And the one thing with frozen produce is it doesn't change the nutritional value. So frozen is just as nutritious as fresh. So even if you haven't managed to freeze your own produce, you can buy it at the grocery store and know you're still getting good nutrition. So this is a recipe I'll share for apple carrot muffins. Using frozen fruits in particular, you can add them easily to baked goods to enjoy that fresh taste all year long. The frozen fruits, because of their high water content, can change their texture. They're not going to be crispy anymore. They'll be softer, but that makes them perfect for pureeing up to make a sauce or for adding to muffins where it's going to soften up anyways. And of course, it adds natural sweetness to our baked goods. So for this carrot apple muffin, we're going to need 2 cups of grated carrots and 1 large apple that's being peeled and grated. So this can be done in the moment, but it can also be done ahead of time. One of my favorite tips is to grate up apples or grate up carrots or zucchini, put them in 1 cup measurements, usually that's what a recipe calls for, into a small plastic freezer bag, and then just store those in the freezer, and they're easy to pull out, defrost, or run under some hot water if you are doing some last minute baking, and add to your recipe. We also need 1 cup all-purpose flour, 1 cup whole wheat flour. If you don't have whole wheat, you could do 2 cups of all-purpose flour. You can do 1 cup granulated white sugar. You'll need some baking soda and baking powder, a little bit of salt, some cinnamon, 3 large eggs. You can use oil, any oil that you like, but a neutral oil like canola oil works well here. We're upping the protein in this recipe and decreasing the oil by using some yogurt. So we're using some Greek style yogurt and some vanilla extract. And then we're just going to make muffins like we usually do. So we're going to preheat the oven to 350. We'll have our grated carrot and apple. We're going to mix all our dry ingredients together. And then in another bowl, we'll whisk our liquid ingredients together. We'll combine those two, the dry and the wet, and then add in whatever our grated vegetables or fruits are. So in this case, carrot and apple, and we'll just stir until just blended, and then put into muffin cups and bake for 20 to 25 minutes. And of course, muffins freeze well themselves. So if you're not wanting to do baking all the time, bake up a dozen muffins and then freeze those, and then they're ready to take out as needed. So herbs can be frozen into individual portions in ice cube trays very well. So we might have planted a lot of basil, however you say it, parsley, mint, all these things that before our fall frost comes and wilts them all, we might want to pick them, but we don't have anything to do with them right away. So enjoying the fresh herbs all year long and avoiding the high cost from the grocery store is to chop them up and put them in an ice cube tray. If you still have those. I know a lot of people, their fridge makes their ice cubes, but so you're going to just wash and cut them. Usually 1 ice cube holds about 2 tablespoons, and that's pretty typical for what to add to a recipe. So you will fill your ice cube tray with your herbs and then add a little bit of water on top and freeze these. And then once they're frozen, pop them out, put them in a freezer bag, and you've got little portions that you can throw into soups, stews, a sauce, or just, put on top of your chicken or meat recipe. And again, you'll have kind of peak freshness from these if you use it within 8 to 12 months. So it will last you until next fall. some vegetables, we might want to take a little bit extra step before we freeze them. And this can be for vegetables like, think of those harder vegetables, carrots, peppers, broccoli, corn, green beans. These are some examples where we might want to do a little bit of cooking of it before we freeze it. And that just helps maintain the texture, the flavor, and the color. So we see the really bright green broccoli here. So we do a process called blanching, and it's very quick and easy to do. You'll cut up your vegetable, in this case, broccoli. We'll boil it in water for a few minutes, so it can be anywhere from 2 to 5 minutes. Then we will take it out and submerge it in an ice water bath. So you'll have a bowl of cold water with ice cubes in there. Make sure it's really cold. And we're going to put our produce in that water for kind of 2 minutes. And this process stops the enzymes from breaking down the vegetable. So you're kind of stopping them from working with the boiling, and then you want to stop the cooking process so your vegetables don't get mushy with the freezing water bath. And then just dry your produce and again, put it in a airtight freezer bag. And this should be good for 8 to 12 months. And one way to use those blanched vegetables is doing a quick pickle. This is a good way to kind of allow those vegetables to last for maybe get an extra month out of them and add some flavor as well. So we also know one reason people don't want to eat their vegetables is because they think they're boring. But so brining them can be a way to add some interest. For making a quick brine, you're going to boil 1 cup of vinegar and 1 cup of water, about 3/4 teaspoon of salt and a tablespoon of sugar. And the salt and the sugar just help with the flavoring, decrease that vinegar taste. Then you'll have your cut vegetables, and they could be not blanched, but blanching helps just soften them up a bit. And you'll put your cut vegetables into a mason jar or any other kind of airtight container and pour the brine over the vegetables. And you want to completely cover the vegetables. Anything that's sticking out of the brine will maybe discolor. Still edible, but it will discolor. And let your vegetable and brine cool and then refrigerate. And this can last for around a month in the fridge. Now, this is not the same as pressure canning. So these canning this way is not shelf stable. It will spoil. So you can't put it on your shelf, but you can keep it in your fridge. And then, of course, you could flavor that brine. Put garlic in there, put dill in there, make some dill pickles, put chili flakes, make some hot beans, green beans for a garnish. And brine vegetables make a good side dish, add them to sandwiches. So it just adds a little bit of more interest. And it makes you look fancy, I think. Like a fancy restaurant. Okay. The other point we can talk about is just eating our vegetables or fruits from head to toe. So did you know that almost half of the food waste in Canada is from our own homes? So sometimes we think about, well, there's waste from the farms or at the grocery stores, but almost half is from our own homes, what we throw away. And on average, Canadians throw away $400 worth of food a year from their own home. So if we're looking to save some bucks, meal planning helps with this, but also just using the whole produce. So you can eat the broccoli stalks. You can peel them so that they're not so tough and slice them thin. You can eat carrot tops and beet greens. And we can get all our nutrition from these vegetables by making things like pesto. So any leafy green can pretty much be made into a pesto. Vegetable stock, keep those onion peels, carrot peelings, potato peeling. Well, maybe not the potatoes, that would be starchy, but the carrots, if you have zucchini peels, that kind of thing can be put into a Ziploc bag that you keep in the freezer and just keep adding to, and then you can make a vegetable stock with it once you have enough. You can also, of course, throw your little bits of leftover fruits or veggies into smoothies. Add these fruits and vegetables to stir fries, and then the refrigerator pickling that we just talked about is another great option. With the vegetable stock, you want to just be mindful of what you'll want your broth to taste like. So that's why I said the potatoes might be starchy, but if you save garlic peels, your stock will taste like garlic. So you just want to maybe keep it neutral with what vegetables you put in there. Usually you don't want to put broccoli into that vegetable stock because broccoli can have that strong odor. So this recipe is also from the Half Your Plate website, and it's making a carrot top pesto. So did you know that carrots come from the same family as basil? So you can sub in carrot tops for basil in a recipe. And this pesto uses half a cup of walnuts, chopped, about 5 carrot tops, roughly chopped, 1 clove of garlic, roughly chopped, half of a lemon, a 1/4 cup of fresh basil leaves, half a cup of fresh Parmesan cheese, salt and pepper, and some olive oil. We're going to chop the nuts, and you'll get better flavor from them if you roast them at 375 for just a few minutes, or you could even toast them on the stove top, or you don't have to toast them at all. It does add a little bit of a different flavor though. And then we're going to set them aside. We'll add our carrot tops, garlic, lemon juice, basil, Parmesan cheese, and the roasted nuts to a food processor or a blender if you have like a magic bullet type thing. We'll add our salt and pepper to taste and just blend until it's a puree. And then when you're blending, you want to slowly add in the olive oil so that it really mixes in. If you just dump it in, you might end up with a layer of oil kind of sitting on top. And just keep scraping it down, keep blending until it's your desired consistency. Pesto lasts about 2 weeks in the fridge, or you can do our ice cube trick for pesto and store it in kind of those 2 tablespoon measurements, and then it's easy to add to pastas, meat recipes, sauces. It's great mixed on top of roasted vegetables. So if you've got squash or parsnips, carrots, adding some pesto makes those vegetables a little more interesting. And just the point here, when you do freeze your pesto in the ice cube trays, you want to top off the ice cube tray with a thin layer of oil. That's going to help prevent, again, browning while it's freezing. And it's, again, safe to eat. It just kind of makes the color not as vibrant. And then we have batch cooking. So batch cooking is a great way to save time with cooking, especially if we're cooking for 1 or 2 people. The motto, cook once, eat twice. We can freeze individual portions to enjoy on busy days. So we're kind of making our own microwave meals instead of relying on things from the grocery store. Of course, we can pack them full of our produce if we make it ourselves. Meals that do well for batch cooking are your one pot, one pan meals, things like stir fries, casseroles, soups, stews. And we can also think about roasting vegetables. So let's say you get one of those squashes. They're 97 cents a pound. That's hard to pass up. But what are you going to do with a whole squash? So do it all up at one time, roast it, and then kind of cut it up into pieces, and you can add it in different ways to your meal throughout the week. You've done the prep once, but enjoy it through the week. So again, adding roasted squash to soups, or dicing it up, warming it up, adding it to rice dishes or other grain dishes, or even salads is delicious. So I have a recipe here for a fall favorite for some, but this recipe is full of other vegetables, all our fall vegetables. So it's eggplant lasagna. So it's kind of like lasagna. You've got your 3 layers, so we'll go through those individually. So we have our eggplant layer. You'll need 2 medium eggplants and slice into about 1-inch thick rounds. You'll need 2 eggs, an egg white, and 1.5 cups of Italian breadcrumbs and some non-stick cooking spray. So for the eggplant portion, you'll preheat your oven to 375 degrees. You're going to make a bit of a station for yourself here. You'll beat your eggs and egg white into a small bowl. Then you'll dip your pieces of eggplant into the egg and then into the breadcrumbs. You want to place your eggplant slices on a baking sheet that's been sprayed with non-stick cooking spray. And the non-stick cooking spray just helps to brown the breadcrumbs, but you could just use parchment paper or drizzle a little oil on them. And then you'll bake your eggplant slices for 15 minutes. After the 15 minutes, you'll turn your slices over, add a little bit more cooking spray or oil to that side, and cook for another 10 minutes. It is important to note you could skip this breading stage if you want to make it easier and just season your eggplant slices with salt and pepper and roast them for 25 minutes. And then we'll have our marinara sauce, and this is where a lot of veggies get added in if we make it ourselves. So we need 1 yellow onion diced, 1 cup of mushrooms diced, 1 carrot diced, 1 zucchini diced, some garlic, a can of whole tomatoes, some tomato paste, and then you can add in some fresh herbs such as basil and some salt and pepper. So lots of fall produce there. While our eggplant is cooking, we'll make the marinara sauce. So we'll heat some oil in a saucepan on medium heat. We'll add the onions and saute them until translucent. We'll add the carrots and zucchini and mushrooms and saute these vegetables until they release their water content. And then we'll add in our garlic, let that saute for a minute, and then add our other ingredients and simmer for 30 minutes. So one tip is to make a double batch of this sauce. It's a lot of work with all that chopping. So make a double batch and save the other half for another recipe or to make this lasagna another time. And then also, if you wanted to cut some corners, you could use pre-made marinara sauce, but it won't be full of all those delicious vegetables. And then we have our cheese layer. So you need 1 cup of ricotta cheese, 2 cups of mozzarella cheese that's being shredded, and 1 egg. So we will mix ricotta cheese, the egg, and 1 cup of the mozzarella into a bowl. And then we get to do the fun part, which is the layering. So in a 9x13 baking dish, we'll spread a bit of marinara sauce on the bottom. We'll layer the eggplant slices and then some marinara sauce, some eggplant and cheese, and just repeat this until you run out of ingredients. Top your dish with a cup of mozzarella cheese and bake at 350 with tin foil covering it for 30 minutes, and then you'll uncover your lasagna and bake for another 15 minutes to brown the top and make it all bubbly and delicious looking. Again, this recipe can be found at halfyourplate.ca. And those batch meals are good to cut up into individual portions and freeze for a later time. And there are a lot more recipes at the Half Your Plate website. This is where I got most of the information other than that carrot apple recipe for today. This is also a great website to go to if you're going around the grocery store and you see some produce that you're not familiar with on sale and you think, oh, what is this and what do I do with it? Half Your Plate has most vegetables and fruits on there. And so you can look up, you know, how do I eat this? How would I prepare it? What nutritional value does it give me? So it's a great resource, and it's Canadian and it's made by dietitians. So we know it's reliable. And then we have Love Food, Hate Waste. So if using up your whole produce, you know, from head to toe is of interest to you, this website is a great place for recipes and ideas on saving money, budgeting for using your produce, and there's little videos on there too. So if you're not into reading things and you want to watch some videos and recipes, that might be of interest. And then we have unlockfood.ca. So this website is brought to you by Dietitians of Canada. It's a great website for meal planning if you're not already doing that. Also, it has information about nutritional values of food, lots of great recipes, and lots of ideas for how to use our fruits and vegetables. And then, of course, Grand River Community Health Center, you can always reach out to us, the dietitians here, for more information or to learn about some of our food programs. So that's all for today. Thank you, and I hope you find ways to enjoy your fall produce all year long. Here's my contact information, and feel free to reach out by phone or email. Thank you.